Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create.
Hi, Two Pizza Marketers. Thanks for dialing back into the show. It's your host, Melissa, and I'm sitting down with someone who I am actually sitting down with for the first time, despite revering his content, following his story, always raising my fist in a yeah boy, say it again, whenever he posts something on LinkedIn. This is a guy that preaches it like it is and actually gives marketers like us really actionable ways to approach what we're doing. So I'm pleased to welcome Justin Simon to the show. He is the founder of Distribution First, and you have probably seen him as the voice of reason when it comes to content, repurposing, and distribution over the last few years on LinkedIn. So first of all, welcome to the show, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Super excited to chat.
You are, and have been over many years, pretty solidly in the camp of a two pizza marketer, which, as you probably know, is the small team marketer, right? Maybe some of us are solopreneurs. Some of us are on a 5-person team, but it's all scrappy. It's all messy sometimes, and it's all a heck of a lot of fun. So could you tell our audience a little bit about the two pizza teams you've been on, kind of what you've seen in terms of those smaller teams?
So the funny thing and how a lot of my, where everything shifted for me was when I joined Two Pizza Team when I was at Metadata. So prior to joining Metadata, just a little background, and anybody who's followed my stuff probably knows this, but even if not, I'll still share it, is I worked for a software company for over 10 years. And by the time I had left that company, I'd actually built up the content team alone with interns and full-timers to over 10 people. So just the content team on the marketing team had a lot of folks on it. And then when I left and joined Metadata, I became marketer number 3. And so I went from having a team myself to a slashed team where it was like, all right, how do I figure out how to get the same volume or the same level of marketing quality with one of me and some freelancers compared to me and a social media marketer and a full-time video person and 2 writers and a website team? Like, how do we do that? And so that was a real fun part for me.
And actually, now that I think on it, that might have been some of my first exposure to your work, because if anybody is listening, one of the podcasts that shaped my appreciation of what a good podcast was Demand Gen U, which you did with WitUp and Huber, and just an insane amount of marketing power on that small team. Talk to me a little bit about when you found yourself on that smaller team. What did you personally do versus contract out? I'm curious, where did you find yourself? When we're able to, or when we are forced to pick what we focus on as marketers, it's always a little revelatory, right? Oh, that's what I do best, or that's what I really am drawn to. What did you fall into when you made that switch from big to small team?
Yeah, so and I'm sure if you chatted with Mark, it'd be like they needed somebody to come in and just kind of own the overall strategic vision for what they were going to do. They had ideas of podcasts, but had never started one, or, they had maybe one, but it wasn't aligned really with what they were wanting. They had doing a lot of blog content, kind of doing LinkedIn. And so my job was to really 30,000 foot view, wrangle it all, get a vision for what we wanted to do from a content standpoint, and then really strategically eliminate some things that we weren't going to be doing anymore, or spread those things out, which is sometimes half the battle as well. Because when I came in there, it was like the first Monday and it was like, all right, what are all the things that are going out this week? And it was 4 or 5. I'm like, we're doing 4 things this week? Why? We're 4 people with it. Why are we trying to share 4 blog posts this week? Or, a blog post and a PR report and a this and a that. It was a lot. And so for me, where I kind of let my superpower shine was just kind of, and as a new outsider, I was able to kind of come in with fresh eyes and be like, why are we doing that? What's the reason? And trying to peel some of those layers apart. And then honestly, one of the first things I did was just start repurposing their best content. So figured out what was working. I mean, it's fun. It's kind of old hat at this point based on my talk track, but it works. And I do this even with companies today, like come in and within 30 days can really kickstart repurposing engine on a content team just with the stuff they already have. And so that was the first thing I started doing, is not necessarily even writing new blog content or creating new podcast episodes. We were 8 or 9 months in before we even launched the podcast. It was a lot of sort of formation of what the strategy was going to be before we did that.
I think to start out with, what we've heard so many times with Two Pizza Marketers is the why matters, right? So I love your point about being the outside party coming in. A lot of folks today in the marketing space are fractional. And I think actually that's a beautiful silver lining to being the fractional marketer is, yeah, you're not embedded in the team necessarily, but being able to say, why is this? And then I'm laughing. I have right here on my desk my no button. And so being able to say no, like walking around going, no, we're not doing that press release because nobody's going to see it. No, we're not doing it. So I love that. Let's go though. I know, yes, it is, the talk track that you've had for a long time, but as you said, it's because it works. Before we talk about distribution, I want to talk about repurposing because it's something that you've preached. It's something that I believe any smart marketer, especially on a small team, has to do. It's the quick win and it's, hyper effective for the time that we have as opposed to writing new content. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know I've seen you've got some very good frameworks around. There are a couple different types of repurposing. Should we hit those for the audience, for the listeners?
I mean, and I think about repurposing in two ways. I think about it in a micro way and a macro way. So at a macro level, I'm thinking concepts, I'm thinking core ideas, I'm thinking core frameworks, I'm thinking anything that's more proprietary. For example, when we were at Metadata, we had a paid ads benchmark report we did every year. So just from an IP perspective, what are those things that at a high level we want to get out? Because I think traditionally people we spend a lot of time creating stuff and we don't spend a lot of time thinking about if somebody doesn't consume the full report, they get nothing. We give people an all or nothing prospect when we don't repurpose and distribute that content. So at a macro level, I'm thinking about those type of things, like strong, spiky POVs, like what's our point of view in the market? So I'll just keep using Metadata as example, but it was like, had a lot of stances against ABM or what ABM is or what ABM isn't, had a whole campaign around that. So it was like, all right, how do we keep that message going? And then it's actually like micro repurposing, which is the classic way everybody thinks about it, which is I've got this podcast episode and I cut it up into 8 different things. Those things blend if the podcast episode hits the message. And I think that's the subtlety of building a proper content strategy is just not doing. There's a lot of random acts of marketing, random acts of content, and we try to do more. We try to just do more, but without having alignment on those things, you're confusing yourself, you're confusing your audience. It just doesn't end up working out.
Yeah, that's really powerful because with the macro and the micro lenses, but as you said, they blend together. I was just thinking about a current content play that we're doing at my company currently. But one other piece about the macro level is also not thinking just about repurposing the content pillars that you want, right? Addressing those. But I almost feel like there's an element of thinking at that level of how do you keep doubling down on them. So we're doing one initiative around just the joy of connecting, right? The idea of networking is great. Now, there's plenty of thought leadership out there that we can revisit, but we actually created a content funnel specifically for it. So this idea of user-generated kind of filling the funnel at a more strategic level then brings it down into the micro level. So as you said, tying things together, thinking about it all in one. What companies do you see out there that are doing it really well right now?
I know people ask me about companies all the time that are doing it really well. I mean, one company that I like is a company called ScoreApp. So Daniel Priestley is their CEO, and they just do a really good job as far as their message, their campaigns, their content repurposing, how they distribute what they might have a weekly webinar, and then that webinar is consistently getting cut up and put on YouTube into 10-minute sections and then getting dripped out onto shorts and different. And they're just doing a good job of really consistent with what they're doing and then just executing at such a high level. Really, if I were to come down to it, where companies really excel or don't, it comes down to execution and executing consistently. Pick something and do that thing.
Really make sure it's a good idea and then do that thing.
Yeah. And then don't hedge, 3 months, next quarter, I think when you're inside a company, it's like very quarterly thinking, very,
There's one company that I'm super into the way they've been putting things out, but I love the way they structured it. So if you've seen Descript they release seasons. So it's actually their product content. It is their how the damn thing works type of content. It's not a podcast, but they release it in seasons. So they just released season 6 and there was a launch, and then they're going to distribute that content out from it. Here are all the different features that were released during season 6. So it's a very structured approach to actually product specific content, not even like thought leadership content. But I think it really fits the mold. And it's nice because then I'm looking forward to what's season 7, right? I have no idea. They probably have no idea at this point, but they know that they'll package up a bunch of things in one and then release it.
And it's serialized a little bit more too. And again, it takes the randomness out of it. That's one thing I've been advising companies to do too. Like a lot of folks want to start podcasts or want to do things. And I'm like, okay, before you start a podcast, like understand most podcasts don't make it past episode 7. There's hundreds and thousands and probably, just hundreds of thousands of podcasts on Apple and Spotify that have 3 episodes. And so I think using the sort of serialized structure that's a good start there. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder. I mean, we kind of do that with our podcast itself. We have seasons too, right? It's just an easier way to structure your thinking and to structure keeping it fresh. And then it's easier to make changes as well. If you're thinking about content strategy and you've got something planned out, then when there's a moment to change it, you can evolve or tweak or make fresh, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I love that. Well, tell us, so you are currently the founder of Distribution First. This is the latest in Justin's pantheon of great work related to content specifically. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to actually found a company on this platform, on this platform soapbox, the pillar of marketing genius. What actually brought you to not just talk about it and do it, but to build a company around it?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it was a lot of things sort of colliding into getting to this point. So when I quote unquote started Distribution First, it's just a podcast. It's still a podcast. I have a weekly show where I talk to people, but it's always focused around what happens after we hit publish. How do we take the things we're creating, get more out of it, distribute it better, think about it in a smarter way? Because there's a lot of marketing podcasts, there's a lot of content marketing podcasts, but in our case, we went at that angle. And then it was really just after months and months of talking about this on LinkedIn, and I have a newsletter, talks about the same stuff, and working with clients and doing one-on-one coaching with clients, it just became clear to me. Again, it's just a bet on my side, but I think community is just how we get better. Every week, I'm getting better from the folks that are inside the community and inside the membership. And hopefully they would say the same thing, that they're able to bounce ideas off of. I think like LinkedIn is great, but it's a different level when you're sort of on the ride together with a core group of folks and you're trying to all do the same thing. And you're really on the path to try and do things that way. And so for me, it was just an exciting way to really help more people, do it in a way that's a little bit more scalable. I can only do so much, work with so many teams, work with so many people one-on-one even. And so I think for me, just being able to have those conversations, I love helping people. If I could just help people and be on Zoom calls and not even be paid, I'd probably do that, if I won the lottery. And so for me, it was how do I lean into the things I excel at and love and be able to do that in a way that, where people, maybe you don't want to spend $1,000 on coaching, or you don't want to spend several $1,000s to have me come in and work with your company. Like you could spend $50-$60 a month, hop in the community and really get all the same frameworks, a lot of the hand-holding, ask questions, and just do it at a different level.
And you've added in the component, as you said, you're getting a lot out of it too. So it amplifies the impact of what you bring by bringing in these other great people who are clearly invested. When they're paying to join the membership, it's a clear investment in wanting to get more out of it. So you really went podcast, email newsletter, compounding that, kind of building the engine. Obviously, your social presence on LinkedIn is kind of a component of it all as well. And then you decided, hey, I'm going to make a space where instead of me always one-to-one servicing people, I can actually create a little bit more use. I mean, really, it's making smarter use of your time as well, because you want to help people, but as you said, at scale. We've seen a lot of people follow this model for different niches, different kind of, call it productizing our services if we want to be jargony about it, but basically helping more people in something that they're really good at. What lessons have you learned from actually pulling that together? Was there anything that you've tweaked since the beginning that you were like, oh, not going to do that anymore? Or wow, I wish, I'm curious.
I mean, I'll say this, memberships in particular, communities, way harder
Mm-hmm.
Like most things, right? Like you go on the internet, it's like, everybody just start a community, just do, membership. Like, oh, it's just that, it's so easy. Everything on the internet's so easy, by the way. But for me, it was just a full on learning curve about what it means to run a membership. At the recording this, like really just about 2 months in to really building this thing out. But what's my purpose as the facilitator of this membership? It's really not to be a sage on the stage. My goal is really not to go up there and spout my wisdom and have all these people come and just follow. It's really not. Like, my goal is to facilitate interactions between members, to facilitate interactions between members and myself, to help people learn, to help people get better. And everybody's different. The reality of like people joining and then not interacting at all, and that happens. Or, maybe the majority of the few who actually do interact and like really get a ton out of it. And maybe they might both be getting value, but it's just a totally different type of business, a different type of thing. And so for me, it's honestly, for my personality, it's just giving myself grace to be like, you're learning. It's okay. You've got time. I'm way harder on myself than anybody else is on me. So I just, give myself that expectation.
That's fair. Well, this will be fun. We'll get to circle back in 9 months and be like, let's reflect.
Hopefully I've got a lot of learnings. I'm sure I will.
I'm sure you will. And I love your perspective about, would you say it's not about being a sage on the stage, right? In so many communities, I look with a very critical eye these days, especially based on kind of where I'm focused for work. And I look at so many where they're building kind of a walled garden, and it may be great and it may be highly valuable, but they're not realizing that that one member who's joined their group is probably a member of 5 other communities and is also very busy in their day job. There's kind of this expectation that my community is the great thing. Mm-hmm. I like how you're approaching it as you're building a space for people to come together and get what they need. But it's not based on this expectation that, you're the only one providing content and you have to give them everything that they need to meet their needs. You're not their be all and end all. You're making the space where they can be a part of a community, which is true community versus one to many pushing out content.
Right. And I think true community, and this again, we'll see if we can get to this point. I think we will, but just around the idea, you have to have that sort of shared identity. And this takes, thinking on my part too, and just understanding of like, not everybody is a distribution first marketer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay. You don't have to be. You might like it on the side, but maybe you're not all in and want to join a community. That's fine too. There's lots of things I like, but I don't want to join the community. That's okay too. But I think having that shared identity around, this is the type of marketer I want to be. I want to be the type of marketer who can be efficient, who isn't worried about just like burning it in on both ends of the candle, like all the things that I had to do as the lean 2 pizza marketer, where I'm like, how can I do that, but do it in a way that's sustainable and efficient and lets me want to keep being a content marketer 5 years from now? I've talked to so many people where they got into it for one reason, are staying in it for other reasons, and would like to maybe be doing it a different way, but they can't see a way out. And so I think being able to provide a space for folks to like figure out how to do that, and whether that's in-house or building their own thing, it's a super valuable skill to have, because I think a lot of times people they get bought into this idea of it's got to be one particular way.
It's a nice way to think about it, that the distribution first marketer is not only a role that people would choose to be in, but also a role that's going to hopefully save some of us from the burnout that is pervasive right now. I loved your point. There's a speech that actually my co-founder Wednesday Women and I give around build community, not a community. And it's just this idea that there are things you can do to build community without having to build a community. Now, if you built a community, great. But one of those things is giving a name to the individual, giving a name to the person who's a part of it. So actually, 2 Pizza Marketing is a 2 Pizza marketer knows who they are. When they hear it, or not even when they hear the phrase, but when you describe what it is, they know who they are. And when I hear you describe a distribution first marketer, that's a very clear person in my mind. You actually dropped a couple bullet points, which were the darn definition of that person. And so when someone feels themselves as that, when they start to self-identify, it becomes community, right? They use that phrase, these are my people, right? They want to go and hang out with them. They want to learn from them. That's a special moment. I'm glad you're making that space for people.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's like anything when you're building, especially when you're building your own business and your own thing, like what are the benchmark? What's good? What's bad? So it's hard, and I tend to just move, but it's been really cool. I mean, we've got, at this point, we're at over 30 members. We've got really, really great conversations that are happening all the time. More members are getting added, and it's a really high quality group too. That's one of the things as well that I'm trying to be cognizant of, is I even structured it to where you can't just come in for a month. The minimum you can come in for is a quarter and get to know the group and get to know the people. And then from there, like let me know. You want to bounce. You want to go for a year, go for a year. That's totally cool. I mean, when you talk about big learnings too, for me, it's less is more on memberships. And honestly, I feel like I'm starting to really learn for myself and with other companies as well. Less is more just in general. So for instance, we think if I met with them every week, you'd think that would be more valuable. But it also gives them more opportunities to, I'll skip this week, I'll just join next week. Or, oh, I missed last week. Oh, now I'm behind.
Yeah.
And so versus like we do 2 a month, we do one that's a training and a workshop, and we do one that's a Q&A, and you can come in and hang out. And those become very valuable pillar points within the community to be able to do it. And it's not, hopefully, it's not overwhelming.
Yeah. And it's more special, right? And
yeah,
it's funny, it translates to the core of actually any marketing as well when it comes to our audiences. Less is more. Like to your point, if someone's not a distribution first marketer, that's fine. There's plenty of other communities they can do. When you find that person and they're just the right fit, just like we would do for any marketing, it's so good. They want the product. They need the product. They enjoy the product. And so absolutely less is more. You know, before we pushed record today, you and I chatted about a related phrase, which I'm going to spin our conversation a little bit. We have talked a little bit about doing more with less, the buzzword that marketers are just, we hear it and we start to cringe because if a boss says, I need you to do more with less, you know, it's going to hurt. You know that you're going to be put under the gun for more responsibility with, less payment, less resources. That said, more with less conceptually for us as marketers can be a good thing, right? We can be more efficient. We can be more focused. Talk to me a little bit about your take on that buzzword right now, or the buzz phrase of doing more with less, because we're all feeling the burnout. Is there some value in that phrase? And if so, how do you see it?
I mean, I think there's value in the phrase. It's going to get to the point where it's like nobody wants to say it or hear it or, experience it. So there might have to be, like marketers love to do, a rephrase of the phrase. We'll come up with another term for it. But it'll get rebranded for sure. But I think it is true. But I think rather than it being a negative, I think we should spin it as a positive. And like we talked about, having that sort of ruthless elimination of what's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Especially in a world where within marketing, everybody's got an opinion. I say this all the time in team meeting. I'm like, there's no wrong answers. Like there really isn't wrong answers. We could do that. We could. And
there's a lot of testing.
And it could work, right? Like a podcast could work. An event series could work. A full-on YouTube strategy could work. A traditional SEO blog strategy could work. The problem is when a company tries to do all those things and then tries to do all of those things across a smattering of topics, ideas, etc. And so less is more to me comes back to, and when we tie it in with distribution first, it's really where it starts to hit the road is like, where can we even where are we distributing things before we even think about creating things?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to sit here and create a bunch of stuff that sits on the website and does nothing for you. I can't do it. I don't have time. Or I'm going to do it for you and you're going to say, what are the results? And I'm going to say, there are none.
Yeah. It's a to do because it was a thing to do. It was not a drive from problem. Yep.
Yeah. I think marketers, definitely content marketers get sort of judged or, viewed in terms of production traditionally. Like how full is the calendar? How full is your workday of creating stuff? And so I think just taking a step back and understanding, what do we actually need? What's the goal? Why are we creating content? And then where in the funnel? What's the intent of the audience when they're trying to view this thing? There's a lot of layers there within marketing, right? Like, I need conversion data on this thing. And it's like, this thing has no bearing on conversion. It has bearing on conversion 6 months from now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Now we need to fill in the gaps with things that convert stuff right now.
You right now are in a place where you have autonomy to make those decisions. How in the past, for those listening who are sitting going, okay, I need to make that case upwards, or I need to give myself some boundaries even. Tactically, how do we do that? I'm thinking of a couple ways myself too, but like really boots on the ground. How have you done that in the past? How does it work?
Yeah. And I would say even me, like I work fractionally with companies right now too. So I still don't have, I have the autonomy from like the outside eyes perspective, which is funny, right? Like I just talked to a client yesterday and she was like, you mentioned the fractional thing. She told me, I love that you're outside. I love that you can come in and just pick things apart. But for me, it's always been about gathering the data I can gather and then telling the story.
Mhm.
Like internal marketing is huge. And so I think that is a underrated skill.
Yeah.
Internal marketing is an underrated skill. And it's not something your boss is not going to turn the strategy around tomorrow and change what they're doing unless you can prove out in some way, shape, or form that you, whether it's other people's case studies, your data, but you have to build that case. There was lots of cases I've built over the years.
Mhm.
And one example I use a lot is, when I was a TechSmith, we had so much content because they were around forever. At the time, a 30, 35-year-old company. And so lots of content, lots of stuff out there. And I wanted to hit pause, like we did 10-week sprints. I wanted to hit pause on content. I said, we've got plenty of stuff. We don't need to create anything new.
Yeah.
And so for 10 weeks, we didn't create anything new. And we just went back and updated old content, refreshed it, added better CTAs, added better upgrades. And we saw such good success on that. I mean, conversion rates were better, all those things, keyword rankings. But I just framed it as a 10-week test. We're going to, pilot, almost like we're just going to try this out, see what happens. It'll give us some good data. But even that took convincing to, get a VP of marketing to be like, we're not going to create anything new. Like, how are you going to do that? Another just tactically way is like, do a deep dive of what is actually working right now.
Mhm.
What's happening on your website? What's happening with your content? What is converting on LinkedIn and what isn't? I think so often we just blindly go through our motions of like, I posted the webinar link on LinkedIn and got 2 likes, but I posted it on LinkedIn, or I did
Check the box. Yeah.
I check the box marketing and I did the thing. And when you sit back and look at it, it just gives you can arm yourself with a lot of data to say, I like to do the 30, 60, 90 of like, look back at those 30, 60, 90 days, all the content we made, what actually happened, and then present that case. And then you can kind of, you're telling the story, you're doing marketing, you're not lying, but you're just trying to figure out how do I, based on what I know, adjust. Or you might find things and be like, oh, dang, that's working. I guess I was wrong.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get a little tactical on that one because I'm really more just personally curious from the latest in your view. We sit down, we're doing this audit. What either tools are you using or key components of the metrics are you looking at? I mean, sure, we can look at likes and engagement on social channels. What else? What are like the power tools currently that would actually give you insight into what's working from a content standpoint?
Yeah, it depends on I mean, you can't go wrong. Personally, I hate GA4 right now. So I can't
show me someone who loves it.
I can't stand Google. I used to love Google Analytics. I used to love it.
I was a junkie. We could go all day on the down.
So anyway, I won't go there. But, let's say it kind of depends. But if we just go traditional content team with blogs and that type of stuff, I think you can get a lot of data out of like just Search Console, a SEMrush or an Ahrefs, like just to get a lay of the land about you created this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece. Its goal was X, Y, and Z. In reality, here's what happened. And then I like to do it too from like, especially when you're thinking about more on the branding side of marketing, an exercise I've done with companies before is if you take LinkedIn just from how do we look to the outside world perspective and say, I'll ask a company, what are the top, what are your top messages? What are your top point of view? What are the top topics you want to talk about? I'll write them down. And then literally you just go back over 60, 90 days and you see how many emails did you send that touched on that? How many LinkedIn posts did you do that touched on that? There was one company that I did and it was, this was a while ago and they shall go nameless, but they talked about, they had this list of 5 things and on LinkedIn, for instance, over a 90-day period, they talked about those things twice.
Yeah. They were saying it, but they weren't doing it.
And so it's just like this realization of like, oh, why don't people understand what we do? Why don't people understand what we offer? Why don't people understand what our point of view? And it's like, well, you didn't share it.
You're not giving them anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you too long, but one of the main questions I love to ask our guests is we're in these small team marketing. We're running fast. We're doing our best with tools like GA4. Oftentimes we are facing what I like to call a marvelous mess, where you may be having fun. It may be turning out all good in the end, but it was a hot mess. You started to touch on it with, I sat down with this company and they weren't doing this. Can you give us a marvelous mess? And I'm hoping it's going to be in the content area because everyone always has messes in events. Don't get me started. How many messes come with events? Does a marvelous mess come to mind for you that you'd like to share with the listeners? One time when you were like, oh my God, this is a disaster. Maybe it worked out, maybe it didn't. Happy ending, up to you.
Yeah, there's probably been many, many marvelous messes. Definitely events have been a big one. A marvelous mess when I was at Metadata was, because we were lean, like we were trying to do a ton of things all at once, or just different sort of standalone things, but then also have these sort of like monthly cadences of different things as well, which didn't always tie in. But I just remember when we were launching Demand Gen U, starting the podcast, and at the same time, like trying to prep everything for this giant benchmark report, gathering all the data and how are you going to present it? And I remember just being like, this is so much. I'm trying to wrap my head around everything we're trying to do. And I just remember it being a ton of work and me being like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do it. And we pulled it off. We figured out how to make it work. Podcast just kept on ticking. Benchmark report launched without a hitch. We actually worked with an agency and created some content off the benchmark report that ended up like being some of our top ranking content. And we weren't even really focused on SEO, but it just really kind of tied a lot of things together where in the moment you're like in the mud trying to do all the things and make sure nothing goes off and it feels like it's never going to work. And then you kind of can take that step back in that breath and be like, oh, okay, that was maybe not perfect. Maybe it didn't go perfectly to plan, but hey, everything launched, everything went out. We got it.
Yep.
We're cruising.
I love it. A little bit of hunker down, a little bit of ship it and don't worry if it's not perfect, a little bit of working with a great team. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes the mess is just there's too much going on and you got to get your way through it. Interesting. That's a good one.
Yep.
Well, as we get to the end of time, I could chat with you all day. Listeners, you have just sat in on Melissa and Justin's first chat, essentially. This is the point of Two Pizza Marketing is small team marketers sitting down and dishing together for a little while. I'd love to let the listeners know, where should they follow you? Where can they find out about Distribution First? What's the best spot?
Yeah, if you're interested in learning about Distribution First, the membership, you can go to distributionfirst.club. If you want to listen to the podcast, we do weekly podcasts and interview super smart people. Sometimes I do solo episodes and we talk about all things distribution. You just search Distribution First for that. And then if you want to join the newsletter because again, my whole goal is to give people options. If you like podcasts, listen to podcasts. If you want to read short stuff, follow me on LinkedIn. You want to read long stuff, join the newsletter. Newsletter's at news.justinsimon.co. And yeah, that's a fun one, but those are weekly things. And my whole goal, again, is just to help people try to curve the burnout a little bit and be able to get more done with the less things that they do have and be able to actually, I think the key part too that we didn't touch on, Melissa, is enjoy it. Yes, stop the burnout. Yes, be able to, do more with less, but then also like wake up and enjoy the work you're doing and do it in a way that's sustaable. I think like sustainable marketing, let me just drop that bomb before we.
I know. Well, now I'm going to keep you. Yeah. You are fractional. You've got your own company. You've got all these things and yet you're still smiling. That's part of what Two Pizza Marketing is we're kind of junkies for this stuff. We love it. We don't want to burn out. So I love that you ended on that note of enjoy it and happiness. Okay, quick then. I'm going to steal this. What is one Justin tip for continuing to smile? Okay, it's distribute. Distribute first. Don't continue making. Besides that, maybe even personally, what's a tip that you do to kind of not hit that point of burnout, to not roll over into the frowny phase?
Yeah, that's tough because, running your own thing too is a slog, right? I think, anybody who's doing it, it's a slog. You're out there kind of just on your own trying to figure out life. And so for me, a lot of things, how I stay smiling is like, I've had to separate I love marketing. I'm a junkie, but I've had to find things that aren't marketing that I also like, and just think like other things, separate.
What are they? Tell us what the things are.
Oh gosh. Anyway, I love to go play golf. I've got a tee time set for, in a couple of days. So I'm going to go play. I love golfing. I've actually found it I've started to do 2 walks a day, just no inputs. Again, it's like these small things, not groundbreaking, but just things like that. Or even just going to a coffee shop, having a cup of coffee, reading a book, stuff that isn't work and isn't striving and isn't getting better. I think for me, naturally, those things come very, very easy. But what I found is in order to actually make me better and make me want to strive and wake up on Monday and be like, this is awesome, I have to actually take Saturday and Sunday off. Mm-hmm. Like I have to be able to separate from the things I'm doing to give my brain that space. And so I think like, how do I stay smiling? The best days I stay smiling is when I've given myself a break. The days that I'm in frown mode and like super stressed and hate my work and all that is when I'm like just trying to like plow through stuff. And it's like, all right, dude, just take a step back.
I love that so much. Someone recently was pushing me, and I think this is the right move. I said I have relaxation things that I do. I do get away. Also, I have kids, so I can't really get away. Exactly. There's that. Making time for yourself when you've got kids is, ooh. But they were pointing out that play was the really important part. It's good to be doing something that literally doesn't have an outcome or an output. So golf is beautiful. I love the idea of just reading a book at a coffee shop. It's a different form of play for maybe the less athletic that are listening. But if you're golfing, if you're dancing, if you're whatever. My friend was trying to push me to go back and play pickleball because I love pickleball and I haven't played it forever. I would say that there's also outcome in sports, but maybe we can give ourselves a little bit of competitive nature even in our play. Well, that's good. I'm glad we got to touch a little bit on the human that is Justin behind all this incredible work you're doing. Thank you for taking the time today to share with the listeners. It was great to chat. I can't wait till we get to do it again.
Absolutely. It's super fun. Loved it.
Cool. All right. Have a good rest of the day. Go play some golf, go read some books, and maybe do a little bit of marketing.
There we go. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First, and thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode one way or another into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.